okay and not okay in terms of security, and does a particular product or service live up to that requirement? So there's certification components to it to make sure products that have been made available and pitched as cloud offerings actually meet the criteria in the certification. So there's a product certification component. There are standards being developed around SLAs and contract terms and conditions that agencies will be able to borrow as opposed to having to roll their own for everything from disaster recovery and what's okay in disaster recovery and what's okay in terms of security and what's okay in terms of access management, configuration management, all of those things, FedRAMP has the promise of addressing, though it's probably going to take, longer than any of us expects. It's not an easy process to work through that. And then, I have this kind of remark, public clouds get the headlines, private clouds get the dollars. Obviously, this is not strictly speaking, but when I look at kind of the major headlines, some of the things that get the most attention are, let's say, GSA moving its email to the cloud. That's kind of mainstream cloud implementation, and we've seen other examples of that that are more in the public cloud. But when I think we look over the next 3 or 4 years in terms of where agencies are going to be spending the majority of their dollars, where the largest percentage of their dollars is going to shift, it's primarily going to be in the public cloud, and that's or community cloud, depending on how you want to define it, if it's kind of a shared service model. And that's, I think, the dynamic that we're going to see is it's going to be much more gradual shift from the established infrastructure players to the environments that are more attuned to the pure public cloud providers, and it's going to be very interesting to watch that dynamic and how that forms over the next couple of years. Long term, we do believe, and you've seen this in our forecast that I showed a few minutes ago, adoption is going to accelerate as those obstacles kind of get torn down and the kind of routine of implementing cloud solutions becomes more established. And there's, we'll say, definitely in the government world, the mentality of the IT community, for good reason, is more follower rather than leader as it relates to implementing mass, large-scale systems. I don't think any of us is ready for our Medicare and Medicaid coverage to be kind of the first mover in cloud computing. I think we'd all rather that be worked out and figured out rather than being the test bed for something like that. And so, for good reason, government agencies tend to be followers, and I think when we're going to see some of these first movers go through, they'll have that confidence that, okay, now it's okay to enter the water and kind of play more aggressively in this space. Within that, even this year, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities, not only for, we'll say, the public cloud opportunities that are going to emerge, the email, the collaboration tools, the web management, some of the areas like that we've already seen. There's going to be continue to see those types of opportunities. We're going to see opportunities for companies that do the product certifications. Typically, when we've seen that type of pattern in the past where there have been product certifications required for security activities, for financial management systems, there's usually some third-party small business consulting opportunities that emerge out of that to basically help agencies go through that process that's obviously separated from the companies themselves that are trying to get their products certified. So there'll be opportunities in that area. Today, there are opportunities for companies to kind of get ahead of the curve. If they have products that are not ready for the cloud, they can still look like they have cloud offerings by changing their pricing models and being more competitive in the space to make sure that they mirror, even if you're not buying cloud, mirror what it looks like when you buy cloud in terms of how the services are procured. And then obviously more for the infrastructure companies, the traditional infrastructure companies, adopting their technologies and their capabilities and their service lines to help agencies set up those private clouds that I know are going to be very successful over time, but take a while as those standards form and those capabilities form inside of agencies. So hope this gives you kind of a good overview. Again, I'm not a technologist by any stretch, but obviously I've been watching this space for a long time, and hopefully the kind of looking at it from the business side gives you some value in terms of how you approach and your organization approaches this environment that we're in. But with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for any questions you have.
Are you able to track add-ons to contracts? So in other words, not just pure procurements, but expansions and opportunities within that process to sub with existing contract holders?
Yeah, so you mean like task orders, that type of thing?
CLIN additions and things like that. Because your number of implementations, like for the state of Virginia, I don't think that's right, because I don't think there's just two. There may be two procurements out there, but there's been.
Oh, and that's a good point. So at the state and local level, just to be clear about that data, that is just examples of opportunities that we're tracking in the database today that are active. So I don't mean that to represent this is everything that that state is doing with cloud computing. It's really just intended as kind of an indicator of where they are and what they're doing. We have a question back here.
Do we have any stats on what's happening globally? You know, especially like with our allies, such as with Australia, New Zealand?
So for our business, our focus is on U.S. public sector. So we do not spend too much time looking across government. I know there's organizations that that do that, and I'd be happy to share with you some of those offline if you'd like. Somebody's playing Angry Birds during my presentation. How about that? Gosh. All right, well, with that, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
I'd like to invite our last panel of the day to come on up. Now, the moderator for this panel is, full disclosure, on my board of directors. And so happy to have him back. He moderated a similar session last year. And we found that the audience, got tremendous value from it. So I'm sure that it's going to be the same this year. So I'm going to introduce Mike Binko. He is the CEO of CloudTrack, and he's going to moderate the session. I think one of our panelists might be running late, but he's on his way. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike when she's onto the stage. Thank you.
So thanks again for sticking with us. This we consider one of the anchor tenants of this shopping mall. We thank the panelists for joining us. Keith Trippi from the Department of Homeland Security called me 10 minutes ago. He's in a cab. He'll be here about 3 or 4 minutes after we start. Perfect timing for our topic along FedRAMP. So, and their role in that regards. In putting this session together, the last couple of years, we've basically found that the interest in the availability of folks to kind of talk about cloud has obviously ticked up a little bit in the last year. A little side note from last year, we had a little challenge of kind of doing the pre-call. This year we were able to use GoToMeeting without a problem. Last year it wasn't allowed in one of the agencies that we were working with on this panel, so that added a little comic relief for us up front. But I think that just shows some of the willingness for the agencies, and through some of the guidance of NIST with Dawn and her team's participation on the reference architecture, and now moving into the use case scenarios side of where can cloud work for agencies. Those are some of the topics that we're going to hit on. We have 5 topics that we're going to hit along a number of different categories. But before I do that, I got to put out a word. Haggis. Raise your hand if you know what that word is. Wow, more people than I thought. Okay. If you do know what it is, and someone next to you didn't raise your hand, so hold on to that and don't tell them until later in the session. Just put that in your short-term memory if you would suffer me with that. The folks on the panel, we're going to ask everybody to kind of just give a little 2-minute perspective on their agency's view of cloud, initiatives that are going on, a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to jump into the 5 topics, which are their general perspectives. Primary challenges, obviously, that the agencies face. Many have been brought up previously. FedRAMP, specifically with the concept operations report out recently. I'm sure everybody has been shredding that document as far as understanding, does my platform commit to the standards if I'm a vendor? If I'm an agency looking at a platform, how am I going to get it into FedRAMP certification? Procurement horizon, the priority goals that these agencies have in moving to cloud, and where that's going to be moving from a contracting and program management perspective. I think we're going to have some keen insights on that front. And if we have time at the end, we timed it out on the pre-call, and I think it was going to be about 45 minutes or 50. We're going to try and hit on what are the return on investment metrics that the agencies are hoping to address in their movement to cloud. Some of them that popped up in the conversation already and that we're seeing in survey research and feedback into SIIA are surprising. I think Kevin and the Deltek team are kind of keeping the finger on a pulse of several of them. It's not just total cost of ownership anymore. It really does hit at a more fundamental level of ROI at a more sophisticated level with cloud. So best practice management, automation. If you need auditability or transparency, can that be done in the cloud? And if so, how? CloudTrack, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we basically deliver governance, risk, and compliant data and process management in the cloud. And here's Keith Trippey. Thanks for joining us.
Just in time speaking.
At CloudGov, we chose to announce 3 new things with the company today, so I won't go into much depth on it, but what we've announced is version 8 of our platform, which adds considerable support for usability, the governance, risk, and compliance. We've also added an iCloud capability with a K for our cloud related to mobile device support, including the Apple iPad. So a lot of agencies have been asking for that, procuring mobile devices more and more, and you want to make sure that your cloud environment can handle some of the security challenges there. The other element that we're creating is more of a services and solutions approach that we're calling FedRAMP road mapping. We've gone through the activities ourselves. We're personally as a company involved in the reference architecture as co-chairs and on the use case scenario side, and we believe that the ConOps has been a really well thought out document, combination of NIST effort and the working groups, as well as GSA, OMB, and the input from the CIO Council as well. So we're excited about that, and feel free to contact us after the event for more information. So with that, we'll kind of jump into the general perspectives on cloud for each agency. And I'd ask Adrian if he could take this one first and give us some perspectives. That'd be great.
So great. Very, very quickly, so just wanted to give you a footprint of NASA. We're 10 centers strong, 7 facilities, around 19,000 federal employees, and then 30,000 contractors. And if you look at the vision, you know, my short sort of synopsis of the vision is we make the impossible possible. That is a true statement. Every day, we live and breathe with scientists and engineers that are really trying to answer the hard questions, the tough questions that this country, this world has to answer as far as looking at climate, looking at the aspects of what's out there in space, and then how do we understand our role in sort of this cosmic environment in which we live in. And so not recognizing beyond the fact that Earth is not the only entity in the solar system, and making sure that we understand that. As that applies to cloud, NASA is one of the most innovative agencies in the country, period. That's what we do day in and day out. And so cloud is also one of those opportunities that we've taken upon ourselves to invest in. So if I'm assuming that a number of you know what we've been doing with Nebula, and now the OpenStack opportunity in collaboration with Rackspace. That is the kind of stuff that we actually do day in and day out on the mission side. We're now just sort of making investments on that within the CIO community. As it applies to cloud, we're looking at, so you know, when we initially thought about Nebula, we really thought about the scientists and engineers. So we really were looking more towards a private cloud. And one of the things that we're beginning to have some discussions with Keith and others is that now it's going to take a number of clouds, or a series of clouds, no pun intended, in order to meet the needs of NASA. And so instead of the either-or proposition between public or private, why do I have to choose? Why isn't there an opportunity where I could actually receive that service through a cloud broker, or in my words, in a larger scale, a service broker? Because I really want to get to the point of looking at compute across the spectrum. In other words, all the way from the desktop all to supercomputing, with cloud playing a role in that spectrum of compute. So I don't see it as much as a competition between supercomputing and cloud and virtualized data center and hardened data center, all the way down to the desktop where we're talking about virtual desktop infrastructure, so on and so forth. I think there are opportunities where we should look at it as cloud being part of that tool basket that now scientists, engineers, and in general folks have the opportunity to leverage. And so that's what I would say, starting out the box, as a very quick opening statement. take.
Great. So thank you, Adrian. And with that, we know from talking with some folks on your OCIO directorate that big data is a topic that you'll be weighing in on a little bit later, as well as Lorraine on the Veteran Affairs. So Lorraine, would you introduce the main perspectives that you guys have for cloud?
Sure, happy to. Cloud for us is a really, really important future for how we want to conduct business. The Department of Veterans Affairs is the largest civilian agency in government. The last time I tried to do something with the GAL, we had over 330,000 employees in there. Giant hospital system, 57 regional benefits offices, as well as headquarter functions, and the National Cemetery Administration. So huge mission, huge number of employees, lots of different types of systems, and with the people returning back from Iraq and with sort of the drawdown of the military, more customers coming at us than we really know what to do with. So we really see cloud as a way of extending our capabilities. In terms of our position on cloud, we're obviously, or maybe not obviously, but with the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative, we see ourselves really being out of the data center business by 2018. So that means that we've got to figure out who's going to host us and how we do that and how we move in that direction. In terms of infrastructure as a service, there's probably nothing off the table. One of the partners outside, right outside the door there, Terramark. Right now, they're our largest sort of cloud hosting provider. We've paid over $15 billion in education benefits through the systems that are hosted there. We've also got some service offerings where when Agent Orange was introduced as a presumptive classification, there was an initiative called Fast Track where I didn't need to build the system to create the solution. I just needed the data coming out of it to let me know who was qualified and who wasn't. And so we had the entire solution hosted for us in the cloud very quickly. So anyhow.
Great. And obviously,
that's enough of an overview.
And obviously liaising with the veterans that are coming off of active duty, working with the Armed Forces services that they're coming out of, particularly for maybe health records management, data portability becomes a real challenge in that environment. Keith, you want to hit next with Homeland Security? We're going to Keith is going to kind of take the point position when we hit the FedRAMP topic, so maybe save that one for later, but some other initiatives that you might be consuming cloud with.
Yeah, so we, much like the folks then, it's way too much of me, I think, right now. Let's lower that. Just like much of the efforts that Adrian and Lorraine are doing, and the other folks that are up here, we are knee-deep in cloud. I think it's unfortunately a very overused word. The word I like to say is we're buying commodity IT. I think as the CIOs mature and let's not be looked at as the IT people. Let's not be looked at as the folks that just do BlackBerries and desktops. We're mission enablers. We are part of the chief strategic direction that missions are going in. We're partners with our different leadership groups on the mission and business lines. And so the value proposition that we have to look at is, if we're in the data center business, then I think we're in the brick and mortar business, then let's put on a hard hat and go do hard hat work. I don't know if that's really where we need to go in the future. I think probably the better value that we would provide is we're providing computing capability that spans the different business services that we need to go execute our mission. And so as we talked about a little bit earlier here, we are in the department moving very aggressively into right now what we call private cloud and public cloud. In the public cloud, we partnered with GSA to enable, leverage the GSA BPA for infrastructure as a service. We'll be sweeping the deck with all the public-facing websites of the department and putting that out there in the public cloud. We've partnered with our friends over at CIS and enabled a capability that we call self-check. It allows U.S. workers to go in and check to see if they're eligible to work in the United States. We just did a nationwide rollout with our friends at CIS. Very excited about that. We put out a service, it's called Identity Proofing in the Cloud. It's used a lot in the financial services, not used a lot over in our federal space. We have a service that's available that could be reused tomorrow by other federal agencies if we didn't have the break in the supply chain. We have a significant acquisition challenge ahead with us for us to be able to leverage cloud services and share. Why can't I use some of what Lorraine's doing down there over at Veterans? Why can't they use some of what we're doing over here? How come we can't order in a day? Those are things that I'll probably talk about a little later. So that's kind of what we're doing in our public cloud. In our private cloud, we've enabled 30,000 users that are consuming collaboration capabilities across the department. We have an authentication service where 88 different applications across the department are consuming that. So that means what happened? They didn't have to go build their own authentication service. We're providing a shared service for that need. We're also rolling out messaging as a service as we speak. We've got some other efforts around development, test, and infrastructure as a service. You're going to go from the old world to the new world, and I'm a big proponent of the new world, and I do not like the old world. I just spent a 25-minute cab ride out in the rain in the middle of rush hour. That is the old way of doing IT. The new way of doing IT is what we did here. I just walked in, just-in-time speaking. We want just-in-time IT. And so what we're trying to do is to say, going from our old model to the new model, let's provide a glide path for our customers to get from the old world to the new. So put it in the development world, lots of flexibility to be able to go out and create new capabilities, move it over to test, glide path over the wall into production. You know what? Everybody that's in this room that is looking to sell to the government, we all have that same problem, right? Huge opportunities for small businesses to take it, to go out and look at that market space and say, how do I help federal agencies get from A to B? They don't have to be in the air conditioning and server business. They can provide value to us by saying, here's a good, repeatable methodology to get from the old world to the new world. So we've got a lot cooking across this space as the folks do up here. What I hope we can collaborate together on is how do we, marshal the federal, the power of the federal government, and then change the business model to where I want to be able to put $20 million on a contract tomorrow, and I want to move it from my organization legitimately to a vehicle. I'm sure you guys would as well. And then once that happens, I have a fully catalog of services. Adrian talked about that earlier. Why can't we get that? Why can't we move to that model? And I think collectively the feds are starting to have that conversation about how we can shift that business paradigm to the new world. And with that, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Keith. And that touches on a topic that we on the vendor side probably would call legacy to cloud migration, or the interoperability of systems, and we'll touch on that in a little more detail. John Edgar with United States Postal Service. A little bit of a different perspective that you guys have. Obviously, your constituents are the same citizens of the country, and you're involved from delivering probably more so with a broad base of stakeholders from an employee base. So we talked in the pre-call of some of the cultural shifts that might need to occur within the agencies.
Yeah, I think the old to new point is really applies very well with the Postal Service. We deliver 165 billion pieces of mail a year across the United States. And when you think about that, it's not just the physical pieces of mail. The amount of data that's associated with each one of those mail pieces is tremendous. So as we touch on things like big data and application modernization and some of the things that have been touched on today, it applies tremendously to an organization that from an infrastructure standpoint, a technology infrastructure, touches 32,000 postal facilities across the country. We operate our 2 data centers, so we are brick and mortar in that sense, but we've spent the last 10 years consolidating our data centers to where we're down to those 2. Now, given what you've all seen, I'm sure in the newspapers and the financial state of the Postal Service, we're not in a position to grow those data centers. We're closing plants. We're consolidating post offices and looking to optimize the level of service that we provide across the country and do it much more cost effectively. From a technology side, we need to drive the same thing with the technology that we provide. We're not going to be going to build a 3rd data center. We're following the same principles that the rest of the federal government is and looking to take advantage of cloud services and cloud capabilities that can help drive down the cost, but at the same time improve the level of service that we can provide to our constituents all across the United States and across the world. It's an international business. So as we're looking at cloud areas, we are targeting today and have targeted niche areas that we can start to take advantage of and help improve the capabilities that we do have. Certain places that we've already started doing this are in our procurement area. Our internal electronic purchasing system is a software as a service that we have had in place now for about 3 years. So we've got that on one end. On the other end, we've got various custom-built applications that are being cloud hosted in infrastructure as a service functions. Things like where external major mailers can call into this service or send a message to this service and have return labels generated for people that are trying to return products, don't have the labels to make it happen. So it's kind of everything in between, and that's kind of where we are today. But as we do go forward, we definitely are looking to grow that cloud capability, look to bring in some of the new functionalities, tie into with FedRAMP, so that we can do it in a secure manner. We're legally mandated to be SOX compliant. We do a lot of credit card payments, so we need to be PCI compliant, as well as complying with all the various privacy and PII protections that everyone else in the government has to do. So when you put all that together, it's a rather stringent regulatory environment that we must comply with. So as we move into externally hosted solutions, we need to make sure that those will integrate with that as well.
And thank you, John. And I would also say that in your environment, there's also commercial competitive situations that don't necessarily, aren't your drivers necessarily behind decisions from a procurement side or where you might go, but operationally, cost containment, best practice management, and taking a nod from commercial and being competitive is important.
Absolutely. When you think about, protection of privacy data, personally identifiable information, federal government has its standards and regulations around what that is defined as. There are protections we have to have. When we start dealing with commercial mailers that are exchanging data with the Postal Service, they may not have the same definition. So we have a lot of challenges, let's say, ensuring that the data is captured and protected and managed correctly from a non-government environment into the Postal Service. We provide it as the right protections, and then be able to make sure that all the return information around that can be properly distributed and protected back to those commercial companies as well.
Thank you, John. And Stefan Lee, we're very fortunate to have NOAA represented here, really hot off the presses with one of the more recent application stack sides of a cloud deployment recently with the Google Apps environment. So Stefan, as a program lead for that, is going to give us some perspective as we go through. Could you give us a little bit more of maybe a top-level view of other areas that NOAA is looking at?
I'm sure. First of all, on the Google Apps for Government, I spent the last year delivering that for NOAA. That's 25,000 accounts for all of our users across the country, international territories, and throughout the country. And I'm happy to say we completed that transition in December. And if anyone is interested in our lessons learned, I've got quite a lot to talk about, and I'm happy to share our pain. So I'm happy to talk about that afterwards. Anyway, NOAA is very committed to cloud first, which of course means consider cloud in any new procurement. And we're pursuing multiple avenues to utilize that wherever practical, including data center consolidations, which is really big right now, as well as cloud-hosted infrastructure and applications. For data centers, we have a new ground rule. Stop digging. Put down the shovel. Do something different. And when you do that, you have to operate with new constraints. And that is to either use the capacity that you have or go to the cloud. And so that's what we're doing. And because of this, we're not putting in new data centers to a new facility. So we have 2 new facilities coming online very soon, and neither of them are going to have data centers. So that's kind of new for us. So for existing data centers, we're looking at the services they provide and figuring out what do they do, are they readily available in the cloud, and if so, why not put them in the cloud? So for hosting applications internally, we're asking ourselves, why are we doing this? Time to go to the new way of doing things. Out with the old. When the data center lease renewals come up, we do the same thing. We figure out what services are being hosted in this facility. Are these services able to be brought to the cloud? And if so, we don't have to renew the lease. Imagine that, save money. So we're looking at other ways to leverage a cloud to provide access to we provide access to NOAA data to all of our users anywhere on any device, and we have a few SaaS pilots going, especially in the area of geographic information systems. But the bottom line is that NOAA is very committed to using cloud services, and in a time of shrinking budgets, it's kind of a no-brainer. And we talked about Google. It's kind of like the gateway drug to cloud services. So it's a great way to start using the cloud. It's very, very simple. So it's a no-brainer, and you should consider using cloud alternatives regardless of what 1B says.
Great.
Fortunately, they say the same thing.
They say the same thing. It's easy.
Thank you, Stefan. So our second generic topic that we wanted to kind of focus on, our primary topic, is challenges for the agencies as they look to field the cloud initiatives. I know with Dawn's presentation and the working groups within NIST, that's, point of the spear is a lot of the effort is focusing on that, from the early efforts of definition of cloud to definition of a cloud broker to a reference architecture and the documents that were released in November. There's been a lot of heavy lifting, not only by NIST, but inviting the agencies to get involved through the CIO Council and their directorates, but also industry has been actively invited to participate. So if you have not, and you're in this room, you have an interest in cloud either as a vendor or consumer, get involved with the use case scenarios or the reference architecture or the working groups that are available to you. They're seeking your input. We've hit some of these topics, the legacy migration and typo on bridging the old to the new, infrastructure and applications. That's a topic that we're seeing a lot of questions bubbling up. Is it still data center consolidation as the first shoe to drop that we should be focusing on? I think we've heard that there's some success stories there. I think some folks are also looking at it and saying, I don't necessarily need to or should I be looking at data center consolidation if my bigger shoe to drop is on the applications and operations and mission critical side. So I think that's where we're starting to see, and with Stefan's example of Google Apps, that was a right direction to go in the last year for that agency. May not be the case for others, like we had Henry from DISA last year. They're focused on safe sharing. Security is an absolute critical need for them. Secure collaboration. They're not necessarily going to be going to get that in a publicly available cloud environment. So it may start as completely private and maybe moving into federated or community. So thoughts along the lines of big data, data portability. I think that was one that everybody can really, head nod and say that's one that we're going to deal with. I think for the folks that handle big data types, NASA and NOAA, that's clear. You guys have research data, sensor data that is not your typical spreadsheet or Word file or PDF. For the others, I think it's more of the volume of sharing that's going to have to happen. The data portability between stakeholders is really something that we'd love to wrangle with.
Yeah, so, and I guess not only from a standpoint of looking at sort of internal stakeholders, but the other thing is sort of how do we support decision making using our data, right? I mean, so how do we make it available? How do we get it there in a timely way? I mean, that's, when I was at Weather Service, their whole mission is really saying, how do I get the data there in time for folks to make an informed decision? And so one of the challenges we have in general, I think, across government with big data in general, is that how do we now begin to serve that up in such a way that folks can gain access to it? Most of us look for storage solutions, hardened storage solutions, and I'm saying, one of the things that we're moving towards is sort of this storage as a service and moving that to the cloud and saying now, instead of catching your refresh cycle and actually buying more hardware, let's buy more cycles in the cloud to then create that storage of openly available data that's out there anyway, but hard to find. And so I think the whole issue of big data is going to continue to impact us. And we're only talking about structured data right now. Think about unstructured data. I mean, unstructured data is going to really be where it's at. Right now, we're not managing that. We're sort of just, it's there. We know it happens. Everybody creates it. So every time you take a picture of your family and upload it to Flickr, or you take a video and send it over to YouTube, that becomes unstructured data that's available for others to use. And so how do we now, within a government perspective, begin to leverage both the structured and unstructured data and then make that available? So I think there are going to be continued challenges, but I think cloud is definitely one of those things that makes it possible. The other thing on the legacy applications is I think, we've got it, not everything is ready for the cloud. And I think a lot of people are paying attention to getting to cloud or just what can I get into the cloud. I think, my advice to folks who provide services and are looking for contracts is really saying there's a great opportunity from the standpoint of the hard work that it takes to get an application, a legacy application, from bare metal, potentially into a virtualized environment, and then to the cloud. And somebody that actually could begin to build some kind of business practice around that, huge opportunity for you. Because none of us are really, we're sort of wrangling with it, but we sort of do this, right? We're kind of going, yeah, that may be too hard, right? But I think that we've got to get, you guys have kind of come out and sort of help us to begin to think about how we can do that in a clean and agile way and get that into the cloud, because that should be the end state. But if we don't do that hard work on the front end, we're not going to get there. We'll build the environment will be there for them, but the adoption may be low.
with skipping down to the cultural shift, I know, John, that was something in the pre-call that you were really sensitive to with your community of stakeholders, both internal and external. Could you hit on that real quick, and then Lorraine, I'm going to come to you on open source, and then Henry, we're going to hit topic, Keith, we're going to hit topic 3 on FedRAMP with you kind of taking the lead on that.
Sure. I think looking, the way the Postal Service traditionally has operated within IT, it's been very much an internal, we have to do it ourselves model. Technology has evolved fast enough and continues to evolve faster and faster to the point where that isn't an achievable model any longer. We need to be in a position where we're taking advantage of what the best of industry can bring, using that to increase the speed to market of the solutions that we need to provide and those capabilities, and use that also to break down some of the internal cultures that we do have. It's a very unionized environment, so there's a lot of challenges there that we're continuing to evolve through. But I think one example of how we're trying to change that is traditionally, even things like disaster recovery have been totally done as an internal solution. Between our 2 data centers, our model today is they both basically point at each other and replicate the appropriate capabilities in the opposite center so that if there was an issue in one, we can recover to the other center. That's not cost effective any longer. I think one of the things I've got my organization looking at now is trying to modernize the applications, get them to a software stack and a hardware stack so that we could take those and at some point, maybe in the next 2 years, start looking at can we lift essentially all that disaster recovery capability and put that out in the cloud and do it in a way where it's more cost effective. The infrastructure that's in place will be minimal. You don't have to have iron on the floor sitting there doing nothing, waiting for a disaster to happen. Yeah. So when you then, when I was speaking earlier about the security and privacy, it's a big change in mindset for the organization to say, how would you do that if you have to take basically a copy of all your data and your systems and put it out in the cloud somewhere? But that's part of the culture change that we're trying to work through and enable that and try to drive down our costs.
Right. And I think that tying into some of the data and analytics that Kevin and the folks at Deltek have discovered is that disaster recovery, business continuity in the commercial sector. That's where we're seeing probably one of the first areas that our customers in financial services and healthcare and pharma and life sciences are looking to us. It's risk mitigation to them and best practice management from a technical and architecture perspective. Lorraine, that opens the topic of standards. You mentioned open source on the pre-call. I would imagine because of the broad community that you guys serve at Veterans Affairs, those standards are absolutely critical, and some of the elements of FedRAMP that we're going to get into soon and some of the other standards that are being implemented and existing under FSMA and others are critical, I'm sure.
Sure, I'm happy to take that. And the thing I forgot to mention on the call yesterday and probably should have is the Veterans Lifetime Electronic Records program, which is also related and somewhat integral to this. If you look at our legacy applications, they're probably no different than anybody else's. Definitely optimized and designed around the end user of the system who's interacting with the application. What VLR, Veterans Lifetime Electronic Record, is really looking at is taking more of a veteran-centric approach. It's not, are they showing up as a benefits customer, or are they showing up as for healthcare? Or are they showing up for mental health services? Or are they showing up for burial services? Or are they claiming education benefits for a family member? It's really, just like everyone else, I'm sure, these things evolved over time, and that's what we're dealing with now. So we have a dedicated program looking at how we bridge those gaps. So that's an enabler of getting us to this, because I forget which one of you said it. I kind of came in the middle. I think it was you. Like you said as well, the technology is not the hard part. Once you give us that use case, we can figure that out. I mean, we're good at that. We had a lot of years of experience in this room doing that. It's getting the businesses to recognize that, their interdependence. Now, we probably do have an advantage at the VA over most departments in that in 2007, all of the IT shops and the administrations were collapsed and consolidated. So at the department level, it's like we're not just a policy shop. We don't just service headquarters. So I'm the deputy CIO for product development. So I'm responsible for the development of all the enterprise products for healthcare, memorial affairs, benefits, corporate. It's it's one-stop shopping, which gives us that perspective So you don't have to get TSA to share with ICE, to share with Secret Service, and so on. Not that that's not all going swimmingly since I left, I'm sure.
Actually, oddly enough, it's all solved. I don't know. Trouble before, good now. I don't know.
Got it. I understand the problem. So the other big enabler of this is when we started working with the DoD again on an integrated electronic health record. The Secretary signed an agreement last spring saying, you know what, we're all, again, there's no spontaneous veterans. We're all dealing with the same population of people we're serving. DoD was looking to replace Alta. We needed a more cost-effective way of modernizing Vista, and so, the planets all aligned. And so there's an interagency program office between the two departments. How are you going to take two of the biggest healthcare electronic record systems in the country and get them to work together? It's beyond just the Veeler piece. It's beyond just the data sharing piece. How do you open that up? And so on August 30th, 2011, we stood up the open source electronic health record. I forget what the A stands for. Administration, Association. Anyhow, they're our custodial agent for open source electronic health record. And so VA and DoD have made the first contributions. Indian Health Service and other people are starting to contribute to that. Probably our biggest strategic from an application point of view, how I'm hoping we turn the corner on real rapid application delivery. I don't want it to be a mystery on how to do business with the VA. I don't want to be in the Vista business forever. It would be nice for me if everybody understood exactly how our software worked, exactly how it operated, so that when you come in or when I put out an RFP or an RFI for, I don't know, let's say a new scheduling package, something that we've not had a lot of success with in the past, that it's real clear that, hey, here's how all of the data moves around in the system. So all you've got to do is contribute your adapter to get, to interface with the open source version of the electronic health record. And, my integration risk is gone or much smaller than it is today. And from a service provider, not only can you sell to me, you can probably sell to DoD and Indian Health Service and the state of West Virginia and other people that are using this stuff. It becomes this win-win situation. So, I probably should be talking more about the stuff that the ops guys do, but that's not my responsibility. And it's probably getting well covered, and and that, like you said, with voice as a service, and look, with Terramark and DISA and everywhere else, we're on a happy glide path there. But selfishly speaking, it's looking at things like open source that I think are really going to enable solution providers to really show us up front what their value is. And again, so then I can just strike the check and know it's going to work.
Well, I think that's a great segue into FedRAMP and the certification side. And also, I'm hearing what we're hearing on the commercial side, that folks are asking for us as a vendor to be aware that to them, cloud is an ecosystem. They're not going to get everything they need in the cloud from CloudTrack. We realize that. We understand that. They're also not going to get everything they need from IBM or other big established players, much as IBM doesn't want to hear that, but it's true. And I think that ecosystem-ready aspect of cloud is something that we as vendors and the consumers and decision makers, whether it is in a public sector or in a commercial environment, need to work together on solving the challenges that are in front. And I think the FedRAMP initiative for the public sector side, that's going to spill over also into state and local and municipal. It's covering a lot of communities and stakeholders and data. So Keith, could you hit, obviously with DHS's identified role under the ConOps report, there's going to be, you guys are going to be consumers of cloud, which we've talked about, but you also will have an active role in kind of the security elements of FedRAMP.
So getting into the FedRAMP concept, the main concept here that I look at, and as a taxpayer, standardization, right? We've got budget shrinking, standardization, we talked about it down here. We talk open source, open architecture, those sorts of standards that we're looking to drive. There's no reason that we can't share data easier. I can pick up the phone and call Lorraine, but God forbid I try to share data via system, right, with Lorraine, other than say, some sort of messaging capability. So driving standardization on the operations side, I think we're talking about. The security side of this is a whole other interesting discussion. So I'll just start within DHS, then I'll broaden it out to the federal space. Within our organization, certainly Lorraine's old group over there, They did trade, they did law enforcement, they did intel, they did the budget, they did they did all of these different types of data sets, and all of those different sets of data either came with different regulations, different legislation that's associated with that, and that's just within her old group. You go over to two other components that are governed by SSI data. If I were to read system sensitive security information, that's kind of defined one way under the Code of Fed Regs. Yet we have two major components that have completely different interpretations about how you secure the data in those systems to do that. That's just within our organization. When you expand out further, how one group may handle health data may be different than how another group handles health data. So what's so exciting about the FedRAMP opportunity is an opportunity for the federal government to say, okay, we now have a floor, right? So before it was wild, wild west. And so now we're saying what the FedRAMP standard is, can we at least say up through moderate? We are defining what moderate means across the federal government, which to me, if I'm a vendor and I'm sitting in your shoes, I'm saying, finally, right? Thank you for the opportunity to know which target I am now shooting at. It's not moving so fast anymore. I know that if I provide a capability and I get it stigged, if you will, at FedRAMP and I get it cleared through the wickets, I know that I'm open for business. I can hang the shingle on the door that says, I've got an acquisition vehicle for feds to get to me. I've got a good operational capability with some good SLA.